right, hello everyone. Hi Ashley and Mark. And Natalie as well. I am going to give this just a minute to uh, to let everybody in. I know there's sometimes a bit of a lag time between starting the webinar and everyone's Zoom cycling up. So I'm just going to give it 1 minute. I will let you know that we are recording this. Um, so this will be available for everyone once the recording has loaded and we've been able to put it up on the website. We will send a copy out to everybody, and I'll send an email out to everyone after the recording is finished and uploaded, in case you want to share it with another project manager, someone on the board, anyone who might be interested. And I'll send some of the resources in the slide deck in a PDF form. So you will have plenty of resources after this. And hello, Karen. Good to see you here. So I think we'll get started in just a minute, but again, we will be recording this and we'll send out everything afterwards. We'll also be sending out a survey afterwards, asking everyone to let us know, like, how did the presentation go? Is there anything else that you'd like to hear? Or is there anything that we hopefully did especially well? But please be as honest as possible, because when we're doing any of this content, we just want it to be the best it can possibly be for all of you. So thank you in advance for looking over all the materials in the survey. So I think I will get started now. Hello again to everyone. I'm Bryce Gorman. I'm the fundraising educator for Local History Services. And today's presentation will be an overview of the Heritage Support Grant mini grant program. So just a quick introduction. I am, as the fundraising educator, I provide free fundraising consultations, webinars and presentations such as this one. And also I do, pre-COVID, I would do a lot of workshops on various fundraising elements. So if anyone has any other fundraising questions or comments, please reach out to me. You'll have my contact information at the end, and I would be happy to help you. I know that right now it's a very strange time for fundraising, so if you need somebody to talk to about it, I am here. I also manage a lot of functions of the Heritage Support Grant Program, which we will talk about today. And I am joined by Tamara Himmerlein, who, Tamara, if you are available to introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody, and welcome. I'm Tamara Hemmerlein. I'm the Director of Local History Services at the Indiana Historical Society, and I will be second chairing for Bryce today. So I'll be monitoring the chat and the Q&A, and if you have any questions, you can go ahead and put them in any questions about sort of technology, or you're having any problems, go ahead and put those in the chat. You'll see a pull down that gives you the option of all panelists or all panelists and attendees. If you click on all panelists, Bryce and I get that, and I will be looking at that in case anybody has any technology problems. I'll also be monitoring the Q&A. I know that Bryce is intending on doing some Q&A at the end, so I will be monitoring that Q&A for Bryce. And popping in if there is something that a question perhaps that should be answered or could be answered right away instead of holding it to the end, but we are going to hold the majority of questions to the end. And so now that I'm done, I'm going to go dark, but I will still be here. Thanks.
Oh, thank you so much, Tamara. Again, you are currently muted, and we'll be happy to answer any of your questions towards the end. I do want to say that this webinar and all of the content that comes out for the Heritage Support Grant Program, along with any of the fundraising content, all of that was made possible by Lilly Endowment. They have been an incredible benefactor for us. They've made the HSG program possible for, this is, I believe, our 6th or 7th year. And it is just incredible that we're able to do this. So thank you again to Lilly Endowment. And so with that, let's get started. I am going to actually close my video because I've found that it's actually a little bit better for everyone's internet speed and lag time. And since I'm not going to be doing anything like juggling or anything that requires you to watch me currently, I'm going to turn off the video and then I'll turn it back on towards the Q&A. So if you will just pardon me for 1 second, I will stop my video. There we go. All right, so here's an overview of what we're going to cover today. We are going to provide an overview of the mini grant program. We're going to look at the full online grant application process. We will also work to clarify all of the questions on the application in the grant portal. We're going to discuss all of the attachments that are necessary for the mini grants, along with some of the ones that are optional. And finally, we will look at the reporting requirements for the mini grant program. Just a broad overview of how the mini grant structure works, along with some of the requirements here. So mini grants range from $500 to $4,999. Anything above that would be a project grant. So the maximum timeline for a mini grant project is 11 months. There is no matching requirement as opposed to the project grants, which do have a matching requirement. So there is no cash match attached to mini grants. And this is a one-part application process. Other grants and the project grants will sometimes have well, the project grants have a summary of proposal. Other grants will have a letter of intent or something along the lines of that. We have streamlined the mini grant process. It is just one application. So that way we can do a quicker turnaround time than some of the other grants. So once the deadline is passed and you've submitted your proposal, the turnaround time, getting it to reviewers, getting back their recommendations, and sending out the funding agreements is about 6 to 8 weeks, depending on circumstances. Everyone who applies for a mini grant is required to watch a 13-minute ethics webinar, and we'll talk about that in just a few slides. But here on the right, you can see a flow chart. So once you've submitted the full proposal, these go on to a review panel, and the review panel will look over all of the different proposals. They'll make funding recommendations, and then we will award the grants. I have no say in who does or doesn't get funding. Tamara doesn't. We allow the review panel to make their recommendations. For the eligibility, to be eligible for a Heritage Support Grant, an organization must be incorporated in the state of Indiana as a 501c3 nonprofit. This is a federal designation, so if one of our requirements is we do need to see the federal 501c3 determination letter for your organization. And so if an organization submits the Secretary of State designation from the state of Indiana, that is not allowable. This is a federal designation. An organization must reflect history as a significant component of their organizational mission and/or propose a history-focused project. I like to state that one in its entirety because we often have questions, what is a history-focused project? And the definition that we've come up with is that a history-focused project will interpret, present, or otherwise disseminate a historical narrative or information. So if an organization doesn't have history as their primary organizational mission, it's okay. If their project is history-focused, it can be eligible. And finally, we require that an organization must have an annual operating budget under $300,000. This was based on some of the designations for what counts as a small museum. And so we will require that all organizations submit a annual operating budget. And we will talk about that in just a few minutes. So we will consider building and landscape projects if that building or landscape is primarily used to facilitate historical interpretation, or if it houses a significant historical collection. So we wanted to make sure that these are grants that can help an organization and allow them to protect the envelope of their collection, but the heritage support grants are not there to do preservation for preservation's sake. If you do have questions about whether or not your project would be eligible, please reach out to me, Tamra, or your coach, and we can help you with that. Organizations that operate under a larger parent organization can be eligible through a friends group, as long as that friends group meets these eligibility requirements. If this pertains to you, I would urge you to watch the General Heritage Support Grant Overview webinar that's on our resources website. And if you do have questions about friends groups, what is very typical is that a friends group will be, say, public libraries often have friends groups that operate as the fundraising arm of what would be a quasi-governmental entity. So if this pertains to you, please let us know. We will help you with this process as well. The Heritage Support Grant program has several funding priorities. They're intentionally broad. So we realize that organizations have many different priorities, and we want these grants to be as impactful as possible. For this reason, there are 4 broad areas for our funding priorities. Projects should fit into one of these categories. The most common, the most popular is collection stewardship. So projects in this category address the storage, management, and care for collections and associated documentation entrusted to the organization's care. This could include conservation of historic objects, preservation of a structure or landscape, or something that could be very straightforward, like collection storage materials. All of those would fall under collection stewardship. Diversity, equity, accessibility, and inclusion is our second priority. Projects like that fall under the DEAI category focus on efforts to ensure that diverse individuals fully participate in all aspects of the organizational work, broaden the organizations beyond public accommodations, and work to achieve genuine inclusion. I do like to stress genuine inclusion as the key word here. And what genuine inclusion means will depend on your community. Communities that might have a larger Latino population, they might want to prioritize bilingual signage in their museum that has English and Spanish. A community with a older population might want to prioritize accessibility. So the projects under DEAI really depend on your community and ways to achieve genuine inclusion. Sustainability is another priority. Sustainable projects focus on identifying and and accessing internal and external resources the organization needs to achieve goals, and improve sustainability. These projects meet the needs of the present without compromising its ability to meet future needs. So successful completion of a sustainable project sets the organization up for greater capacity to take important next steps. An example of a sustainable project could be a reinterpretation of an exhibit space. Um, as a reinterpretation of your existing exhibit space would set the organization up for future success. It would bring in more visitors. It would bring in potentially more funders. It would help reinterpret the space to meet a better definition of historical interpretation. And finally, we have planning as a priority. These are projects that identify organizational objectives and assess organizational capacity. Uh, a lot of organizations have received HSG funding for assessments of their collections or a museum assessment. Many organizations who are getting started in a larger building project will use a mini grant for a historic structures report to determine what are their priorities for a building project. Or it could be materials that help them properly plan for future projects. So as always, please reach out to us. Um, if you're not sure where your project might fit. Now, there are several expenses that are not allowed by the Heritage Support Grant Program. They often include what would be considered general operating expenses. So that would be rent, mortgage, utilities, insurance, salaries for permanent staff, items for resale, building purchase, or retiring organizational debt. Um, an organization can request funding for temporary project-specific personnel or, say, consultants. We don't fund permanent staff. We do not allow for a percentage of permanent staff to be covered by the grant. But if you have a proposal that includes personnel, please reach out to your grant coach and they can help you work out the details of this. Again, I would urge everyone who might have a personnel need, watch the HSG overview webinar where it has more details about funding for project-based personnel. And if you do have questions, please reach out to me or your coach. All of the Heritage Support Grant Program, all of the proposals go through our grant portal. If you need assistance registering on our online grant portal, please let me know. Again, you can refer to the HSG overview webinar. You can access the online grant portal through the HSG website. It is indianahistory.org/grants. Once you've logged into the online grant portal, you will see this screen. You will click the red box here, apply for a mini grant, and it will take you to the grant application. A couple notes here. This program, the grant portal, it's called Flux, F-L-U-X-X. You can see it up here in the corner. It is optimized for Google Chrome. So if you need help with Google Chrome or downloading that, it is free. I can help you with that. Anyone who starts an application, it is a best practice to copy all of your answers into a separate Word document and have them ready. We never anticipate that there's going to be any kind of issue or problem, but just in case, say, your internet is spotty or there could be any number of issues that come up, it's best to have some form of draft saved. The proposals do require that you fill out all fields before saving a copy. And I suggest to organizations that if they're not ready to fully answer all of the questions in that first round, which that's perfectly acceptable, then it's best to type out just a holding phrase like test or save or just a character, and then saving a copy. So that is usually the best way to be ready and have a draft saved for you. I do want to show you what the process looks like. So if you will allow me just a second here. Um, Now, I want to let everyone see that this is the indianahistory.org. This is our main page for the Heritage Support Grants. You would go down to how to apply. And then this is the click here to apply. I'm not going to click that because I already have one set up. This is our test account. You will see all of the sidebar here. This will let you know if there's any drafts. This will let this section, sorry, my organization or the users will let you update any of your own information if you say your phone number is changed or your organization's structure is changed. And then you would click here to start a mini grant. And this will let you begin the process. So that is, I just wanted everyone to see what it looked like. It is very straightforward. However, if anyone does have any issues with the grant portal, please reach out to me. I will help you troubleshoot through it, and we will we will figure out an answer. So the first sections of the mini grant application involve important details about your project. The project overview has the overview and the team. And so from the overview section, you'll provide the project's title and the total amount of your request. It is common for an organization to request the highest amount available when applying for a grant. However, I do want to stress that it's best to ask for what you need to successfully complete the project. Sometimes that might be at the upper limit. That might be the $4,999. Sometimes it's not. So HSG has been very competitive, and we want to help as many organizations as possible. So someone who might piece together several projects into one proposal, it does decrease chances. And so I just wanted to let everyone know. You'll have to, in this section, you'll include details about the team, who will be the project manager, what is their contact information. And this is going to be our point person. If there's any issues or questions, this will be the first person we will reach out to. And you'll also have to have the project's start and end dates. So just a reminder that the mini grants are 11 months after the start of the project spending period. So this would be for this year, it would be September. Sorry, not September. It would be July of 2020 or 2021. I have an older one here. Pardon me. So it'd be July 15th through June 30th, 2022. You can move that end date up if you do not anticipate that your project will take the entire 11 months. You cannot move the start date any earlier than the beginning of the starting period, the grant spending period. However, if your project is based on, say, starting in October and finishing in February, that's perfectly fine. Oh, if my apologies, I missed something there. If there are any volunteers or anyone who has a particular expertise on your project team, you can add that information here in the project team members. This is also a good place to add pertinent qualifications for some of these individuals. This allows the review committee the review panel, pardon me, to have more context on who's working on this project. The project summary is, it's going to include the project, or sorry, The project summary is going to be the overview of your entire project. So you want to provide enough information to demonstrate that you have a logical plan to address a critical need, and you have the resources necessary to put that plan into action with funding from the Heritage Support Grant period. Support, pardon me, support grant program. Um, the project summary is designed to be an overall summary of the project. So use the space to talk about your need, your proposed solution, intended results, and it's important to remember that your organization exists to serve the public. So when you frame the outcomes of your project, what's going to happen, it's good to speak in terms of the people who will benefit from this. So it's always great to focus on people and not things when discussing the impact of your project. Um, the review committees will be looking for confirmation that your project meets the eligibility requirements as well as the funding priorities. This will be your primary opportunity to make your full case for the uh, for grant support. If you have any sponsors, this is a space to talk about. Um, excuse me, please. If you have any co-sponsors on the projects, if you're working with any partners, say you're working with a local college or you are working with a library, this will be a place to list those partners. You want to talk about how you will manage the funds for the grant. And what the reviewers will want to see is they'll want to see that you have a process in place to manage the funds and make sure that all of the funding is accounted for. And we also ask whether your organization owns the building. It is not a requirement, and so it's not a requirement to own the building, but if you are proposing a project that that requests changes to the building, then and you do not own it, then the reviewers will want to see that you have some agreement in place that allows you to make those changes, and that you have a that you will be there long enough to make that impact. So if you have a year-to-year lease on your building and you want to propose making changes to the building, the review panels will have concerns. But if you have, say, 100-year lease and the building is owned by the city and they allow you to have to make changes as necessary, then the review panel will see that then you'll be able to benefit. Institutional readiness. This section is where you can provide evidence of your organization's capacity to successfully carry out the project. So you want to prove to the reviewers that this is the right time and the right place for this project and for the grant. This is a great space to provide a summary of your organization's history and the accomplishments. It allows the reviewers to draw parallels between the past successes and your current project. You can show that you have successfully implemented building projects or a past collections project. Your current programs, your services, your activities, this will allow the reviewers to understand how the project fits into your mission. It's helpful to provide the reviewers an understanding of the role that your organization plays in the community, and in turn, how your community supports you. So you may find that you need to include specific information based on the project you're proposing. So if you have a collections project that what might require additional information about your collections management process, your accession process, storage capacity. Building projects might require more in-depth information about the facility or some of the structures. If you had a historic structures report in the past, this would be a good place to address that. Other factors you might want to mention include personnel, paid or volunteer, and any qualifications that would contribute to the success of the project. If your staff and volunteers have taken advantage of any special training or assessments, if they've used if they follow professional standards and best practices, this is a place to mention it. So when you are trying to figure out what to include in the organizational readiness section, consider what background information will be helpful to reviewers as they attempt to determine the likelihood of a successful implementation of the project. The next steps, this section will deal with next steps in sustainability. This is your opportunity to explain how your project fits with your organization's long-term goals, and how it's going to contribute to the overall sustainability of your organization. So the reviewers will want to understand where you see this project fitting into the big picture. So let's say you successfully complete your project. What's that going to allow you to do next? Is this going to serve as a stepping stone to future projects? What type of follow-up is going to occur once you finish the project? So along the same lines is the idea that because your project outcomes should be people-focused, as I mentioned 2 slides ago, and should allow you to demonstrate a high level of service to community. How might it lead to additional support in the form of, say, increased visitors, members, volunteers, more donors? Is this going to contribute to the organization's ability to secure additional funding, which would lead to a higher level of organizational sustainability? These are all questions to consider as you address how the project fits into the larger organizational picture and why it's critical to your future. There are a few additional questions in the narrative. First, this will be the co-sponsors questions. Not every project will be a part of a partnership. I had addressed some of these earlier, but many will have the opportunity to be part of a partnership. A good relationship with community partners contributes to sustainability, so consider whether there are opportunities to engage with others on your project. If you've identified partners or co-sponsors, make sure to account for their specific role in your description of the project. We advise organizations to get a letter of support or a letter of understanding from these partners. This is a great way to confirm that all parties are on the same page. The next question about building ownership. So again, organizations do not need to own their building. They do not even have to have a building in order to apply for a grant. But if they do, and if the project proposes changes to the building, then the review committee will want to see that addressed. So again, if you have any questions about building ownership, if the county owns the building, so that would be another time for reviewers to see a letter or confirmation that you have the approval to make changes. If you have any easements or covenants on the building, this is a good place to address that. And if you have any questions, please contact me or your coach. And then the final question for it will be how the organization will manage grant funds. So again, the reviewers are looking for confirmation that the organization operates under a system of checks and balances, and that all financial information is going to be available to and approved by the board of directors. So they want to see that there's a process in place that allows them to track specific funds and ensure that the funds will only be used for the grant. If asked, organizations will have to provide proper documentation of the spending. So providing evidence that you do have procedures in place will be very helpful for the review panel. Fundraising capacity is often a section that make people question, why are you asking about this? Will this affect my chances to receive a grant? And so I do want to talk about some of these. Although the review committees may look at this information to determine if your organization has experience managing grants, The primary use for this is our own data collection purposes. This allows us to better understand the extent to which organizations are doing fundraising on their own. A large component of the Heritage Support Grant Program is fundraising education. So this is great data for us. You will not be penalized if you've never written a grant application prior to this. So what we ask is that please be as open and honest as possible. This is just going to allow us to help with the educational components of the Heritage Support Grant Program. A requirement for all grant applications, mini grants, and project grants is to watch a 13-minute ethics webinar. So historical collections are held in the public trust and must adhere to a field-wide standard of ethics that encompasses accountability, governance, and other practices. It's important that we ensure the funds dispersed by the Heritage Support Grant Program, which has been entrusted to us by Lilly Endowment Incorporated, are being used responsibly by organizations who adhere to the standard of ethics. Tamara has done has put together this webinar. It is 13 minutes. It has a lot of great information. So you will have to confirm that you've watched it. If you do not want to watch it through the grant portal, we have it available on our resources page as well. So you can watch it at your leisure. There are several documents that are required for the mini grant program. There are several that are required, and there's some that are optional. So required documents include your organization's annual budget, the project budget, which is on the HSG budget template, a list of your board members and their affiliations, and a copy of your IRS tax determination letter. Again, this is not the state sales tax exemption letter, but it's the one from it is the letter from the IRS that confirms you are a 501c3 nonprofit. Your organization's annual budget can come in whatever form your board has approved of. You do not need to use a specific template. If you do not have an operating budget, please contact your coach, and we can walk you through that process. We can help you with that. You are free to use our Heritage Support Grant budget template for your operating budget if y'all do not have one in place, but we will require an operating budget. So the board list and the affiliations, we found that this is a useful tool that we hope organizations are using to their advantage. So your board members are your biggest advocates. They should be your greatest champions. It's important to know who they are, and it's important to know how they're connected to your community. Their affiliations can include professional affiliations, philanthropic responsibilities. So it doesn't have to be every single affiliation that your board members have, but it's just there to let us know who they work with, whether they're retired, do they serve on other boards. So it's useful information when organization is looking for specific expertise or networking opportunities. If your organization is going to be applying under a Friends group, so Friends of the Marion County Public Library, which I just made up on the spot, you will be required to supply a letter from the parent organization confirming that that organization, the parent organization, supports the project and the application. It also has to confirm that there's a member of the Friends group on the project team, and that grant funding, all of the funds from HSG, will be held by the Friends group. This is there to make sure that everyone is in agreement, and that the Friends group still has the ability to control the funds. So there are also some optional documents. Optional documents include up to 2 letters of support and additional documents you think will strengthen your case. This could include contract quotes, before photos to document the condition of an item or a structure, design plans, drawings, there's a ton of different materials that could be put in there. I would stress, please be judicious in selecting your attachments. It's important to see, to learn about your project, but you do not want to fatigue reviewers with unnecessary documents. If you intend to include a letter of support, please note reviewers want to see letters that specifically address this project. Support letters from other grant applications or awards, reviewers have found that it really does not advocate the project's case for support. And what they have been looking for in the past, and what they've noted, is that they want to see letters from partners, co-sponsors, particularly when the project requires their participation. They often want to see letters from someone who's familiar with your services, a program participant, a visitor, or a member. So when selecting additional documents, you'll please choose the ones that will be most helpful in strengthening your case. And you can include all of the documents. It is this button here. It is the green plus icon here. You can label all the documents, and if you want to refer to them in the rest of the proposal, it's good to refer to them by their document title. That's just an easier way for reviewers to look at the documents without getting lost. All grant projects will require a project budget. This is the budget form that's required for everyone. It's available in the grant portal. It's available in our resources page. It's also required for the final grant report, which we'll talk about towards the end of the presentation. You'll notice that there are 3 different sections. There's income, expenses, and balance. And the template does have some formulas built in, and it will automatically add up the totals and add up the budgeted, and then deduct the actual to create the difference. So you don't have to do that yourself. So the project budget is there to provide a line item account of the expenses and the income. It should be detailed enough to provide needed information for the grant viewers. And it can include descriptions, unit numbers, prices. If you want to include detailed item numbers or colors, you are free to do so in the notes. In the income section, you're going to include all the cash coming in for this project. So the first line, it should be your Heritage Support Grant request. So if you wanted $1,000 for your project, then it would be Heritage Support Grants, $1,000 budgeted, because you won't have to fill out the actual yet. The next lines can include any other sources of income. This might be funds you already have in hand, or any fundraising that you still have to do. So let's say it is you're requesting the highest amount for the mini grant, $4,999, and you have a commitment from a community foundation to provide another $2,000 for this project. Then you would list Heritage Support Grant up here at $4,999, and then Community Foundation of X County, $2,000. And if you actually have those funds, it would go in the actual. The expense section will include all the anticipated expenses. At this point, again, you're only using the budgeted column, the one that is in the yellow box here. So you don't need to put anything in the actual column until you actually make purchases. So you do want to pay attention to the balance section. Your total income should equal your total expenses. You want to have a projected balance of 0. If some projects can reasonably include a 5 to 10% contingency or just-in-case funds. This is especially true of building projects or projects that might be weather dependent. If If you're not sure whether to include contingency funds in your expenses, please talk to your coach. They can talk through it. Reviewers do often ask for things that are weather related or building related, whether they're taking into account different contingencies. So it is good to include them. So we realize budgets can change. Something might not go the way you anticipated, either for good or bad. You might have to reallocate some of the funds. So if your grant is funded and you find yourself in this situation, please work with your coach. You can make changes up to 10% of your total grant, but anything beyond that will require a formal request. Again, this is something that your coach can help you with down the road. And uh, so the project budget can only include direct costs. It cannot include indirect costs such as overhead or administrative expenses. Those are not allowable costs. Um, all right. When you're finished with your application, you've uploaded all the additional documents, the budget looks great, it's time to submit it. So before you hit the submit button up here circled in red, please review all of your attached documents. You want to ensure that all the required documents are in place. So, if you want to make yourself a little checklist, you also want to make sure that everything is readable. It's not common. Occasionally, a file can get corrupted when it's transferred. So you just want to check each one and make sure it looks good and it's not, say, upside down or something like that. It's a good practice to share a draft of your proposal with a colleague, especially one who hasn't been working on this, because a second set of eyes might spot an issue that you couldn't. Um, and it's good to print a final copy for your reference. Once you're ready, save the form and hit the submit button. Once you've hit the submit button, we consider it fully submitted. Finally, be aware of the submission due date. Applications will not be accepted late. If you are our favorite organization and we love your project and you click the submit button a day late, we cannot accept it. So please be aware of the submission due date. So although it's tempting to gloss over this topic, I recommend that you give it some thought. As I had said earlier, the grant program is very competitive, and we always have more in request than we have money to award. For this reason, reviewers often have to make difficult decisions. When the committee considers applications that are on the fringe of getting funded, those who have phased projects or a clear idea of how partial funding would be used, they're more likely to receive funding than proposals that don't give a clear indication of what they would do with partial funding. In addition, the review panel wants to see that the organization has a plan B. And it's good because it's great because it shows that you can prioritize which parts of the project are most critical, which ones have to come first. So it's a great way to manage your project, and it's also something that the reviewers really take into consideration. Once you've submitted your proposal, once the deadline is passed, um, external committees will do all of the reviewing. These reviewers are history, museum, nonprofit professionals. They're representatives from the local History Partners program. It is not me. It is not Tamara. It is not your coach. We follow the recommendations of the review panel. So the criteria that we provide to the review panels is very much in line with the application. The projects need to fit with our funding priorities, present a compelling need for support. The reviewers are looking for evidence of institutional readiness, that it's the right time and place. They want to see a well-designed project with a thorough plan for implementation. They look through the project budget. They want to make sure it's reasonable, that it's complete, and finally, that the intended results are clear. So the reviewers want to know what your intended outcomes are, how you're going to track and measure them, and how they'll contribute to your organization's stability. We do have the review form on it's on our resources page. You are absolutely free to look over what the reviewers will see, how they'll judge it. Every organization that submits a proposal and has the proposal reviewed, we give you feedback. This is part of the educational process. So when you get the feedback, it's listed as items that the review panel felt would improve this proposal, and items that were well received. Some of the great aspects of it. So um, these are things that are there to help you with any future proposals. And you receive this whether you get funding or not. All right, so let's just be very optimistic. Let's say everyone here gets funding. Congratulations, the reviewers loved your proposal. Once you have received funding, you have completed the project, all grantees will have to submit a final report to close out their grant. So the final report can be submitted at any point during the grant period once all of the funds have been spent. Um, the deadline is 1 month after the grant period. So until the final report is received, organizations cannot apply for any funding, any heritage support grant funding of the same type. So let's say you receive a mini grant and you want to apply for the mini grant that's coming up in September, the Cycle D mini grants. You would not be eligible until the final report for this one is submitted and approved. The final report will look for information about the progress, the impact, lessons learned, future plans, education, and fundraising. It's going to require a final budget, which I'm going to just jump back really quick. It will be the same budget template. You can save your own budget template from the application and just start filling in all of the actual expenses. So if you had $1,000 mini grant, then you would list the $1,000 of actual expenses. That will be required for all of the report. While it is not required, it is incredibly helpful to include any supporting documents. If you have an invoice, if you have before and after photos, press coverage, testimonials. In all honesty, I love seeing the before and after photos. If we can show off a project and all that, we love having photos to do so. So if it is applicable to your own project, we'd love seeing it. But again, it is not a requirement. And with that, in addition to your coach who's assigned when you register for the grant portal, the grant program, you can contact any member of the grant team. You can contact me, you can contact Tamara if you need any information. Here is our contact information. You can reach us by phone or email. I will say right now, it is best to reach out to us via email just because we are not always in the office all the time. So I appreciate the time that you all have taken to learn more about the mini grant program. And I hope that you'll join us for future training opportunities. We have a lot of great programs coming up this year. So I hope you'll join us for more. And at this time, I will restart my video if I am able. And there we are. I'll restart my video, and anyone who has any questions or comments or anything, I'm happy to address them now. So I'm going to take a quick look. Okay. So I will, I'll give everyone a minute or two to type in any questions they might have. And again, if you have a question and you're just not sure, if you want to ask it right here, if you want to think about it, please reach out to us. We're happy to set up a time to call or anything like it. Um, but
Bryce,
yes, ma'am. Yes.
I do have a quick question
Yes, please.
because you've mentioned reaching out to your coach. Um, how how important is it for applicants to reach out to their coaches?
I,
Does it help?
that is a that is a great question. So um, I'll just answer that. I'll start that answer with one of the things that we've been tracking is we look at organizations who apply for funding, and then we also look at whether they have been in contact with their coaches. And one of the things we found is that organizations that reach out to their coach, especially early, often have a better likelihood of receiving some form of funding. We I will. I'm honestly very proud to say this, but the Heritage Support Grant Program with the coaches. I've been in fundraising for a while. I've never seen anything like this. And if I were applying for funding, having a coach would be it would be like a lifeline. It would be an incredible benefit. Your coaches are only there to help. They are there to provide honest feedback. They are not there to write the grant for you, but they can look at your proposal and say that yes, this makes sense, or no, this doesn't make sense, or you might want to elaborate a bit on this. They can what they can do is they can provide that feedback, and it's not going to negatively impact your likelihood, your chances of funding. It'll only improve it, really. Um, so for anyone here who has not reached out to their coach, please do so. They're incredible people, and they have remarkable skills with both helping with the proposals, along with just general skills in museum studies, exhibits, collections, all number of things. And if they don't know the answer to your question, they will find it out. We very rarely will say we don't know. So yes, that is. I am going to have a hard time not gushing over the coaches. But yes, please reach out to your coach. Um, so I will check and see if there are any more questions. I don't see any in the chat or the Q&A at the moment. And again, please reach out if you want to do so offline. And I will look at any of the other questions that have come up for the mini grant program. But so I do want to change the sharing screen here really quickly, just because I have an extra minute. Here is the, oops, pardon me. There we go. I'm just going to use this extra moment since I have a minute or two. For our website, for the Heritage Support Grant website, I already showed everyone, here's where you can apply. We also have our guidelines. You can look here for any of the review process materials. You can see a blank template for what the reviewers will be using. Training is for items like this, any webinars, mini webinars, anything upcoming. And then here in the resources, this is what I wanted to show off. Let me just move down. So we have the budget template, but we also have a document that talks about how to fill out the budget template. Now it is, since it is there to cover both the project and mini grants, it will address the cash match, but that is not going to be required for the mini grants. So you don't have to worry about that. We also have a logic model template. I will say this, reviewers love seeing that organizations have used a logic model, and coaches love talking about it. So it would be, you will make their day if you want to talk about logic models with them. We have application copies, recorded webinars. So you have a lot of tools available to you anytime you like. And if there are no additional questions or comments in the chat, I will say thank you very much for joining me today. It's been a pleasure to, oh, I do have a question. The question is whether an organization can apply for a mini grant if they're currently applying for a project grant. You absolutely can. You can apply for both. You can only have one grant type open at a time. So you can have one mini grant and one project grant. You cannot have two mini grants or two project grants. So you absolutely can have one of each. And I will check. Okay. Well, again, if there are any other questions or comments, I'm going to stop sharing my screen at this moment. Please email me or Tamara or your coach. We are always happy to help. Thank you so much for joining us today. And I wish you all the best of luck in your own proposals. So have a wonderful day. Goodbye, everyone.